بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا المرسلين ورحمة المرسلين محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد, respected listeners, today we recited the 26th juz as we move into the latter part of the Quran. We come across a number of shorter surahs. We began the surah Al-Ahqaf, meaning the savaging in the surah. Allah begins by speaking about the revelation of His book and that the skies of the earth and everything in between have been created for a purpose. Allah challenges the Mushrikeen in Makkah that all of those deities that you call out to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, show what they created, what share do they have in the skies. I mean, this is all the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what of these shuraka, what of these gods? They've done nothing, they've got no share. So then why do you call out to them? Allah speaks about the Day of Judgment. And again, many of the Meccans, they make all kinds of claims and all kinds of requests. You know, tomorrow we'll recite Surah Al-Qamar. They requested that Prophet ﷺ split the moon. They would say things like, why wasn't the Prophet sent as an angel? And then another one was, why wasn't an angel sent with the Prophet? Why was, and here another one, that those who disbelieved, they said regarding the believers, if this was good, meaning if this religion was good, then these lot wouldn't have lead us to it. Meaning these downtrodden Muslims, they would never have beaten us to it. One narration, this was related, this verse was revealed in relation to Zunaira radiallahu anha. Zunaira radiallahu anha, she was actually the slave of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anha before he accepted Islam. And he would actually beat her to try and turn her away from Islam, but she didn't. So they said, this slave woman, how could she be a believer? If this religion was any good, then how could she get there before us? So these are the kinds of things that Allah says that they would say. Allah then speaks about the rights of one's parents and especially one's mother. And we've spoken about this a number of times. And then there's a dua here at the end. Very similar to the dua of Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salatu wasalam. رَبِّ أَوْزِعْنِي أَنْ أَشْكُرَ نِعْمَتَكَ الَّتِي أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيَّ وَعَلَى وَالِدَيَّ. O Allah, grant me the ability to remain grateful of your favour that you have bestowed upon me and upon my parents. And grant me the ability to do good through which you become pleased with me. According to many ulama, these verses were revealed in relation to Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Because at the end here it says, "Aslihni fi dhurriyyati min," and correct for me, or make proper for me within my progeny. And it is said that with Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salatu wasalam, so with Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, his whole family accepted Islam. Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he had an amazing relationship with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. When the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was approximately 20 years old, at that time he was trading on behalf of Umm Khadija radiallahu anha. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu once accompanied him. He was 2 years younger than the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And he became extremely impressed with the character of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And this is where his friendship, begins to take form and to become really strong with the Prophet. And as we learn even later on, when the Prophet at the age of 40, when he declared prophethood, Sayyidina Abu Bakr was the first adult male to accept. And once somebody said something about Abu Bakr, the Prophet he said, none of you, when I brought the message of Islam, all of you had questions, and all of you had something to say. The only person who had nothing to say and who unreservedly believed in everything I said was Abu Bakr. Allah speaks in some more detail about the rights of parents, and then near to the end of the surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the people of Sayyidina Hud alayhi salatu wasalam. And again, Allah reminds them that these were the people who were much mightier than you. And in fact, they were so deluded in their disbelief that when the punishments of Allah came in front of them, they thought that this was a cloud that was going to bring down water and relieve them from the famine that they were suffering. But no, this was the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which completely destroyed them. We then recited Surah Muhammad. Surah Muhammad is a Madani surah. It's also known as Surah Al-Qital, meaning the Surah of battle, because many laws related to fighting the path of Allah are mentioned in the surah. When the Prophet ﷺ left with Sayyidina Abu Bakr from Makkah for Hijrah, he turned around and he faced the Makkah and he said, and he spoke, and he was extremely upset that he was driven out of Makkah, and he said that, Makkah, I would have never left you if they hadn't driven me out. And it said that on this occasion, Surah Muhammad was revealed. Surah Muhammad took a whole different approach to everything, because this was now preparing the Prophet for a different phase in the movements of Islam. In Makkah, the Prophet were tormented, tortured, persecuted in so many different ways. So many of them died. Sayyidina Ammar bin Yasir and his family, his mother Sumayya, she was killed viciously at Abu Jahl. Sayyidina Bilal almost, had it not been for the generosity of Sayyidina Abu Bakr, he would have also. So there were many of them. They were all persecuted in Makkah, and Allah hadn't allowed them to respond physically to all of this torment. But now that the Muslims were moving away from Makkah and were doing Hijrah to Medina, the advent of Islam was going to take a different turn, and soon the Muslims would be allowed to retaliate. And as we learn in the second year of Hijrah, the Battle of Badr took place. But in this surah, Allah mentions many laws in relation to jihad and fighting the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Here, one of the verses mentioned, Allah says about there's some laws related to the prisoners of war. So Allah says, when you meet them and you capture them, then Allah gives two options. Either you can free them, or you can accept a ransom on their behalf. This verse, however, apparently goes against the verse we recite in Surah Al-Anfal. So in the Battle of Badr, when they had those prisoners of war, the ruling was that those prisoners of war should have been killed. There wasn't an option of ransom, and there wasn't an option of free. But here Allah gives the option of ransom and of free. The reason is that the other verse was related to the Battle of Badr. This was the first war of the Muslims against the disbelievers. And In fact, in the hadith, Prophet says that after the Battle of Badr, when it came to the debate around the prisoners of war, because of the decision that we made, it was very close that Allah would have sent a punishment that would have destroyed us all, except for Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu and Sayyidina Sa'd ibn Mu'adh radiallahu anhu. Because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and most of the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, they wanted to free them and accept a ransom in exchange for these prisoners of war. But Allah's decision was no, these should be killed. And this was the same opinion of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu and also Sayyidina Sa'd ibn Mu'adh radiallahu anhu. And even the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he wanted to free them. But the reason why the ruling is different there than to here is because that was the beginning of Islam. And Islam hadn't developed the strength it needed. So to free those prisoners may have caused harm for the Muslims in the future. But then later on, after the Battle of Ahzab and other battles, the rulings changed. Because now Allah allowed the Muslims to accept ransom because Islam had developed its strength. And so there wasn't that fear of the Muslims being harmed as a result of freeing these prisoners. So that's where the two rulings are different. But it's amazing that Sayyidina Umar, in fact, ulama have written books called such as Muwafaqat Umar, meaning those places where Umar and Allah agreed. Just imagine what an amazing Sahabi he was. He wasn't a prophet. In fact, one hadith of Prophet does say that لو كان بعدي نبيا لكان عمر. If there were to be a prophet after me, it would have been Umar. Subhanallah. So Umar was amazing. So many times he would say things and he would have an opinion and Allah's opinion would be the same. In fact, there are verses of the Quran that say that Umar he said these words and then Allah revealed verses of the Quran that were exactly similar to the words of Umar. He was an amazing person. And who else was with him? Sayyidina Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. Again, another warrior and ardent supporter of the Prophet ﷺ. We learned when we studied the Battle of Ahzab, when Sayyidina Sa'd ibn Mu'adh passed away, the Arsh of Allah shook, the throne of Allah shook when he passed away. Children, these are the heroes you need to learn about. And these are the heroes we need to talk to our children. Just the lives of the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, amazing people. SubhanAllah. The laws of fighting the path of Allah are very intricate. These are obviously have a lot of discussion behind it. This isn't the time or the place to be able to go through all of them. There are laws related to fighting the path of Allah, prisoners of war, slavery. So a few of these are mentioned in the surah. We then recite the Surah Al-Fath. Surah Al-Fath meaning the victory or the conquest. It's a Madani surah. Allah begins the surah by saying, إِنَّا فَتَحْنَا لَكَ فَتْحًا مُبِينًا. Indeed, we have granted you an open victory. In this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about not just the conquest of Makkah, but even before that. So what happened was, in the 6th year of Hijrah, Prophet he once saw a dream that he was entering the Kaaba and the keys of the Kaaba fell into his hand. And then he also saw in his dream that he was shaving his head. So when he told the Sahaba about his dream, and he said to them that I feel that this is a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we will perform Umrah. The Sahaba were extremely excited that, and for many of them who had come from Makkah, they wanted to visit Makkah again. So they began to prepare for Umrah. And the Prophet ﷺ didn't tell them when they were going to go, but they in their zeal, in their excitement, they began preparing for Umrah. So when the Prophet ﷺ saw their zeal and their passion and their excitement, he said, you know what, let's go, we'll go for Umrah, and let's see what happens. But then he instructed the Sahaba that we won't fight, we won't go prepared for battle. And he also invited some of the neighboring tribes. But then they said, a lot of them said, for example, some of the Bedouin tribes, they said no. They said, look at Muhammad, he's taking us to our deaths. So they refused to. So the Prophet and the Sahaba, they marched towards Makkah with the intention of performing Umrah. They took their sacrificial animals with them, and they made their way. When the Meccans heard, they thought to themselves that this is not going to work out good for us. If the Muslims come, then and they perform Umrah, then the rest of Arabia will talk about how we were unable to stop them. And we suffered defeats in Badr, Uhud, Ahzab, and now we're going to let them come and do Umrah. So they said, no, we're not going to. So they set an army as a barricade to stop the Muslims from entering. Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, they reached a place called Hudaybiyah, and they camped there, they waited. And then this is where many different negotiations took place. Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam sent somebody called Bishr to Makkah to go and see what the situation was. He went and he found out that the Meccans were preparing for an all-out war, if needed, against the Muslims. Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when he came back, he told the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, what are they doing? They don't have the strength. They become so weak. Badr, Uhud, Ahzab. Why are they doing this? And remember, the Prophet, he didn't want to fight. And not only that, they were still his people. They were still his people. He still had that why do they do this? Why are they willing to hurt themselves and their families? We're only come for Allah. That's all we want to do. And he sent messenger, look, we haven't come to fight. We've come for Allah. We will do Umrah and then we will leave. But they were adamant that they weren't going to let him perform Umrah. The Sahaba were prepared to fight the Prophet. Then they sent people over to negotiate. Sayyidina Khalid ibn Walid wasn't a Muslim at the time, and he says that I was watching it, and I was leading the army against them if they were to advance. And he said that once I saw them facing towards the Qibla, and then I thought to myself, this was a great opportunity to attack and assassinate the Prophet. And he said, we were about to, but then I thought to myself that, you know what, we'll do for next Salah time. We'll prepare properly, and the next time they stand for Salah, we'll kill them. But then it was at that time that Sayyidina Jibreel came, and he revealed the laws of Salatul Khawf. So Salatul Khawf is during battle where the Muslims will have two groups. One group will engage and face the enemy, whilst the other group prays Salah. They'll perform one rak'ah and they will swap. And that way they're able to protect themselves. So then Khalid ibn Walid says, we can have an opportunity after that anymore to fight. In any case, the Prophet ﷺ, they sent different emissaries and negotiators. Urwat ibn Mas'ud came. He was the one who came. And again, the people who came to talk to them, they went back and they said, look, just listen to him. Just listen to Muhammad. He's not asking for anything that's unfair. Just let them. And we've never prevented anybody from performing Umrah. People come from all over the world to perform pilgrimage here. We've never stopped anybody. So why do we stop? Just let him do his Umrah, he'll go. Muckins will say, no, we're not going to let him. Then Urwat ibn Mas'ud, when he came, and then there was a bit of discussion with him, and then a bit of an altercation with some of the Sahaba. But then when he went back, he said to them as well, he said, why do you stop this man? And he said something very beautiful. He said, لَقَدْ وَفَقْتُ عَلَى الْمُلُوكِ, that I have been sent as a delegate to many kings. وَفَقْتُ عَلَى قَيْصَرَ وَكِسْرَى, I have been sent as an emissary to the Khosrows and the Caesars. But then he says, فَوَاللَّهِ إِنْ رَأَيْتُ أحد يعذبه أصحابه كما يعذب أصحاب محمد by Allah, I've never seen a leader whose people respect him like the way Muhammad's followers respect him. For Allah, he doesn't even spit except they run to get his spittle and to rub themselves over it. And he said that they don't, when they sit in front of them, they sit in total silence. And they don't even look at him out of respect. They said about the Sahaba that when they would sit in front of the Prophet, birds would perch themselves on their heads because they would think that they were inanimate objects. That's how respectfully they would sit in front of the Prophet. And here Allah says clearly that respecting the Prophet Allah says, but we have sent you as a witness and as one who gives glad tidings and a warner. Why? So that these people, you believe in Allah and His Messenger, and that you respect and revere. Then the Prophet ﷺ decided to send one of the Sahaba to Makkah to negotiate with the Meccans. So he asked Sayyidina Umar, you go in and go and speak to the Meccans and see if you can persuade them. The Sayyidina Umar said, look, O Prophet, I'm one of their greatest enemies, and my family won't protect me in Makkah, so I won't achieve anything. Send Uthman. Now, Umar wasn't scared. The last person to be scared. When he accepted Islam, he went, the Muslims used to put a hide in worship. Before Umar accepted Islam, it was a hide in worship. When he accepted Islam, he went right into the middle of the Kaaba and he said, anyone who wants to become an orphan or lose his child or become a widow, or wants his wife to become a widow, then come and face me here. So Umar wasn't scared. He just said, look, it will be pointless me going. They won't listen to me. And they will hurt me, of course, but they won't listen to me. My family won't protect me. So he said, send Uthman. Uthman he was respected even amongst the Meccans, and his family would protect him. So Sayyidina Uthman went. They wouldn't even accept him. And then it was a person by the name of Abad, who later on accepted Islam. He gave Sayyidina Uthman protection, and then he was able to walk around in Makkah. And the way it would work is, if somebody was to give another person protection, nobody could harm that person. If they did, then they would be up against the person who gave protection and his family, or whatever comes with that. So Sayyidina Uthman, he spoke to the Meccans. Again, they were unwilling. He also went, and the Prophet told him to go and visit the poor Sahaba who had been left behind, or who didn't do hijrah, and give them some glad tidings and tell them that they will soon be coming to Makkah. So Uthman came and he spoke to them. At the same time, remember the Meccans, even though they weren't engaging in battle, the Sahaba had no intention of engaging, they were still throwing arrows and still trying to do things. And there was a group of them, about 50 of them, that were just looking for opportunities to try and kill the Prophet as one of the Sahaba. Now the Sahaba were caught and they brought him to the Prophet. Now here's the dilemma. Here you have the Prophet who's got 50 of their men, and on the other hand you've got Uthman was in Makkah. And then at this time a rumor broke out that Uthman had been martyred. So the Prophet was extremely upset. So then he gathered the Sahaba and then Allah speaks about this. He says, Allah is pleased with the believers when they were pledging their allegiance to you beneath the tree. So the Prophet underneath an acacia tree, he gathered the Sahaba and they put their hands together and they made a firm resolve that they would all fight to their last to avenge the death of Uthman. The Meccans, they had obviously become fearful. the last thing he wanted was the Muslims to march on. So they sent another person, saying this Suhail ibn Amr, they sent him to talk to the Prophet ﷺ. When the Prophet ﷺ saw him, the Prophet ﷺ, he was happy, because he thought that, first of all, the name Suhail means soft, and the other thing is that he realized that they were sending him because they wanted to come to an agreement. But at the same time, the Prophet ﷺ, he said to the Muslims that, look, if they give me any reasonable terms, then I will accept. So Suhail ibn Amr, when he came and he spoke to the Prophet ﷺ, again he reiterated that, look, we can't let you come this year. You can come next year and then you can perform Umrah. But not this year, it's not going to happen. So then the Prophet ﷺ agreed. And then they put together a treaty with a lot of other things in it. And all of these conditions very unfavorable to the Muslims. So things like, for example, if anyone from Medina was to escape to Makkah, then they can stay there. But if anyone from Makkah was to escape to Medina, then they have to be returned. And there were many conditions that weren't favorable for the Muslims. When Umar read these, he thought, what are these? How can we accept these? And the Prophet said that I will accept if they give me any reasonable conditions or things that we could work out, then I will accept. So then Umar contained himself and he said, I went to the Prophet and I said, oh Prophets of Allah, aren't you the true Prophets of Allah? I said, of course I am. He said, are we on the true religion? He said, of course we are. And he said, what is this then? Why do we have to accept these conditions? So then the Prophet said, oh Umar, don't worry. These will work out for us. I am the true Prophets of Allah, and things will work out in our favour. He went to Abu Bakr said, what are these? And Abu Bakr said the same to him. And Sayyidina Umar himself says, well, I was never in doubt until today. I couldn't accept that how we were accepting all of these conditions against us and in favour of the Meccans. But then one of the Sahaba said, Umar, ask Allah for forgiveness. And Umar says, when I came to my senses, I asked Allah for forgiveness, and I prayed so much nothing to ask Allah for forgiveness. Anyway, this negotiator was talking with the Prophet and they agreed on all of these conditions, and then they drew the treaty up together. So he wrote Muhammad Rasulullah from Muhammad, the Messenger of Allah. So Suhail said, no, take Messenger of Allah out. We don't need you to be a messenger. And the treaty has to be written in a manner which is acceptable to both of us. So then Prophet told Ali, Ali, remove Rasulullah. Ali said, I can't do that. So then the Prophet took the paper and he removed it. So then the treaty was drawn. After this, the Sahaba, well, actually, whilst they were putting this treaty together, Abdullah ibn Jabir, he was the son of Suhail, the one who had come to draw the treaty. He escaped to Medina from Makkah. So this man said to the Prophet, look, and remember his father, what happened is he had accepted Islam, but his father, he had locked him up as a punishment and wouldn't let him leave until he gave up on Islam. So then he said to the Prophet, look, my son, he's escaped. So we're not going nowhere, and nobody's signing anything until he gets returned. So the Prophet said, look, we haven't signed the treaty yet, so it doesn't apply. He said, look, treaty or no treaty, if you want this to go ahead, bring him back, that's the only way it's going to work. So then the Prophet spoke to him and said, look, just come back. Don't worry, Allah will open a way out for you. So then he came back. And then the treaty was signed. But then what happened? He escaped again. And not only him, but a few more of them, they escaped. And what they did is between Mecca and Medina, they camped in a place in the middle. And a few of them, so what would happen is, the ruling was that if anybody from Mecca escapes to Medina, they're supposed to be sent back. Well, the Prophet would send them back, But then what they would do is they would join these lot in the middle. And what these lot would do is they would raid every caravan of the Meccans. So any of the Meccan caravans that were, they actually stopped the trade of the Meccans completely. Because the Meccans couldn't go to, they would trade in Syria. So the Meccans couldn't go to Syria because every time they would go towards them, these guys would raid them. So the Meccans became totally sick and tired of them. And they said to the Prophet, look, you know what? Forget that part of the treaty. Just let them go. They can go to Medina. We don't want this. They've stopped everything. Every time our people go, they keep raiding us. Forget it. You just take it. Now, this treaty, the Prophet would actually say that people say that the conquest and the victory came in the 8th year when they actually marched. The Prophet said, no, this treaty of Hudaybiyah itself was the conquest and was the victory. Why? Because this laid down the foundation for the conquest of Mecca. Why? First of all, this period where they sat there, camped out in Hudaybiyah, the whole of Arabia watched, and they saw the resolve of the Sahaba who were willing to give up their lives for the Prophet. Not only that, the Meccans were at a prime, they had prime opportunities to wipe out the Muslims. But Allah had struck fear into their hearts and they wouldn't. And the Arabs saw how Muhammad, this small group of men, was able to do so much. And because of this treaty, the Sahaba were now able to move around. Before they couldn't, but now they could move around. Which is why after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, the Prophet sent letters to all the other kings all around Arabia and Peninsula, inviting them to Islam. And this was only possible through the treaty. And the treaty was, the actual march onto Mecca only took place because the Meccans, they broke the treaty, which we knew, and the Prophet knew they were going to do. So, even though people call the conquest of Mecca the victory, the Prophet would say that I would see, when Allah says, إِنَّا فَتَحْنَا لَكَ فَتْحًا مُبِينًا, that we have granted you a clear victory, is that we would see the treaty of Hudaybiyah, and that as the actual victory. And it was because after the Prophet had sent out letters to all the neighboring kingdoms, people began to enter Islam in their throves, in their groups. And this is what Allah says, people would enter into Islam in groups and hordes. So, and the conquest of Mecca took place in the 8th year of Hijrah. And we've spoken about that before. And Prophet after the Meccans had broken the treaty, what happened was, when the treaty was drawn up, other tribes were able to ally themselves with either the Prophet or the Meccans. So you have all these other little tribes. They would ally themselves either with the Meccans or with the Prophet. There was one tribe, Banu Khuza'ah, they allied themselves with the Prophet and Banu Bakr, they allied themselves with the Meccans. Now Bakr and Khuza'ah, they always had this issue between themselves. So once what happened is, Banu Bakr, they launched a night attack on Khuza'ah. And the Meccans thought that Muhammad's in Medina, he doesn't know. So what they did is they supplied them with weapons. But then Allah informed the Prophet that this is what happened. And this was the breaking of the treaty. And we did this in Surah Al-Tawbah. Because of the breaking of this treaty, the Prophet then instructed his Sahaba, let's get ready. And that's when they started to prepare for the conquest of Mecca. In the 8th year of Hijrah, the Prophet marched onto Mecca unopposed. Because the Meccans knew that they didn't have the strength anymore. And it was at that time as well, many of them accepted Islam. What's more important is the attitude of the Prophet entering into Mecca as a conqueror. The Sahaba say the Prophet had his head bowed down so low that his forehead was touching the back of his head. And that was a humility and a humbleness of the Prophet and which was the sunnah of the Anbiya. In their moments of glory, they would be the most humble. With that, we completed the recitation of Surah Al-Fath, Surah Al-Hujurat, inshallah we'll speak about that tomorrow. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا المرسلين JazakAllah والسلام على محمد وعلى المرسلين. ولا تأتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. واغفر لنا ذنوبنا وإسرافنا فيما أخطأنا وسبحانك الغافرين. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم إنا نسألك خير ما سألك نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ونعوذ بك من شر ما استعاذك به نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. وأنت المستعان وعليك البلاغ ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. وصلى اللهم وسلم